20 years. 20 years and you're telling me I'm redundant? Caspian Whitmore's voice cracked as the termination letter slipped from his trembling fingers, floating to the floor of conference room B like a death certificate. The fluorescent lights above buzzed with mechanical indifference while his world collapsed in real time. His chest constricted so tightly he couldn't breathe, not from anger, but from a terror so primal it made his hands shake. After 2 decades of 16-hour days, he had absolutely no idea who he was without this job. The cruelest irony hit him like a physical assault. He'd spent 20 years making himself indispensable, optimizing every process, streamlining every workflow, becoming the optimizer everyone relied on, only to discover that his entire department was worth exactly $2.3 million annually, and outsourcing to Austin would save the company $800,000 per year. He was literally worth more gone than present. His mortgage payment, $180,000 annually. His daughter's college funds, depleted for Maya's theater program and Sophia's advanced science camps. Elena's part-time bookstore job, $28,000 yearly. The math was devastating, but the existential calculation was worse. Without his corner office, his business cards reading Senior Operations Director, his reputation as the man who fixed impossible problems. Who was Caspian James Whitmore? For 42 years, he'd never asked that question. Now it terrified him because he genuinely had no answer. Caspian had been the operational backbone of Meridian Tech Solutions since he was 22, fresh from business school, with hungry eyes and infinite capacity for work. Colleagues called him the optimizer, the reliability machine who could find inefficiency in any system and eliminate it with surgical precision. While others chased innovation or creativity, Caspian mastered the art of making things work. 15% cost reductions, 30% timeline improvements, 25% productivity increases, all documented in meticulous spreadsheets that became company legend. But beneath this professional competence lurked an invisible limitation that had been systematically destroying his life for 2 decades. If you're not useful, you're worthless. This unconscious belief had infected every decision. He chose safe promotions over interesting lateral moves. He said yes to every project, every late night, every weekend crisis call, believing his value as a human being was measured by his professional indispensability. His typical day began at 5:47 a.m. with coffee and email before Elena and the girls stirred. By 6:30 he was analyzing quarterly reports. By 7:15 he was rehearsing meeting strategies in his Honda Civic. Home by 8 p.m. if lucky, 10 p.m. more often, weekends spent catching up on projects he'd fallen behind on during the week. Elena had stopped asking him to family dinners 2 years ago. Maya, now 16, had learned not to invite him to her theater performances. He'd missed the last 4. Sophia, 14, barely glanced up from her phone when he walked through the door, having long ago accepted that Dad was a weekend visitor in his own home. He'd promised himself this was temporary. Once he reached the next level, once he had enough saved, once he'd proven himself completely, then he'd have time for relationships. The climbing never stopped. There was always another benchmark, another promotion, another way to prove his worth through professional achievement. Now, sitting motionless in the Meridian parking lot, key in the ignition but engine silent, Caspian faced a deadline more urgent than any project he'd ever managed. Eleanor's patience was wearing thin. He'd seen it in her eyes during their last conversation about being present. The girls were becoming strangers. His father had died 3 months ago, and Caspian realized with gut-wrenching clarity that he'd barely known the man, too busy optimizing other people's businesses to build relationships in his own life. The ticking clock wasn't about finding another job. It was about the growing chasm between him and everyone he claimed to be working for. Maybe 6 months before his absence became permanent, even if he found work tomorrow. The terrifying truth? He wasn't sure he knew how to be present, even if he tried. 3 weeks into unemployment, Caspian sat across from Indira Blackthorne in a coffee shop that smelled of cinnamon and possibility, his hands wrapped around a cooling mug like a lifeline. She was nothing like the corporate headhunters he'd been meeting. No power suit, no polished pitch about placing him in a similar role with better compensation. Instead, she had kind eyes, silver-streaked hair pulled into a loose bun, and an unusual credential. She'd been a successful operations director herself before becoming a career transition counselor, specializing in what she called compass recalibration. "Before we discuss your next position," Indira said, sliding a brass compass across the scarred wooden table, "tell me about this." Caspian picked up the instrument, its weight startlingly familiar. "My father's. He was a geologist. For 43 years, spent his career finding valuable things buried underground. I discovered this in his belongings after the funeral, still in its original leather case. What does a compass do? Points north, gives direction when you're lost." Indira's smile held secrets. "That's what 90% of people think, but it's completely wrong." She reached across and gently turned the compass in his hands. "A compass doesn't point north. It aligns with magnetic north, which can be 15 degrees off from true north. More importantly, it doesn't give you direction. It gives you orientation. The direction you choose to travel is entirely up to you." Something fundamental shifted in Caspian's chest as he stared at the spinning needle. "Most professionals," Indira continued, opening her laptop to reveal a diagram of a compass with 4 different colored needles, "spend entire careers following someone else's magnetic north. Their parents' expectations, their industry's definition of success, their peers' approval, their fear of financial insecurity. They think they're heading toward their goals because they're following the needle, never realizing they're not actually going where they want to go. Subscribe to our channel, because what you're about to discover might change everything you thought you knew about career success." She pointed to each colored needle on her screen. "What if I told you that you have 4 different compasses inside you? Your values compass, what truly matters to you beyond money. Your talents compass, what you're uniquely gifted to do better than most people. Your impact compass, where you can make a difference that only you can make. And your joy compass, what energizes you instead of draining you." The metaphor detonated in his mind like a revelation bomb. Most people only follow one compass, usually the money compass or the status compass, and wonder why they feel lost despite being professionally successful. They're navigating by magnetic north when they should be finding their own true north. Caspian's 20-year career suddenly looked like perfectly following someone else's map to someone else's destination. "But I have responsibilities," he protested. "Mortgage payments, college funds, practical realities I can't ignore." "I'm not suggesting you ignore them. I'm suggesting you navigate by your own compass instead of everyone else's. What if practical and meaningful aren't opposites? What if the reason you felt empty despite success was that you were succeeding at someone else's life?" She pulled out, her phone showing him a social media post gaining viral traction, a photo of a compass with the caption, "The most dangerous navigation mistake isn't losing your way. It's perfectly following the wrong compass." The comments were exploding with people sharing their own stories of professional emptiness despite external success. "This resonates because everyone feels it," Indira said. "The gap between where they are and where they actually want to be." Hit the notification bell so you don't miss insights like this, because understanding the difference between magnetic north and true north might be the most important career lesson you ever learn. Caspian stared at his father's compass with completely new eyes, not as a relic of someone else's journey, but as a tool for finding his own true north instead of automatically following magnetic north like a programmed machine. For the first time in 3 weeks, he felt something other than panic flooding his system. He felt genuinely curious about his own life. Caspian's first attempt at compass navigation was a spectacular disaster that cost him $3,400 in wasted applications and 2 weeks of precious time. He applied to purpose-driven organizations, non-profits, B corporations, companies with mission statements about changing the world, crafting cover letters about wanting to make a meaningful difference, while secretly hoping they'd pay close to his previous $165,000 salary. The rejections were brutal and consistent. Overqualified, overexperienced, overcompensated. Non-profit directors earning $85,000 annually weren't eager to hire someone whose last performance review mentioned his expensive optimization recommendations. Here's where most people panic and take any job that pays the bills, never realizing they're about to repeat the exact mistake that got them lost in the first place. Financial reality hit like successive body blows. His savings would last 4 months, maybe 6 with aggressive cuts. Elena took evening shifts at the local bookstore, her first employment in 15 years, coming home exhausted and quietly resentful. Maya and Sophia started researching community colleges instead of universities, though they tried to hide their disappointment. But something had fundamentally changed during those coffee conversations with Indira. For the first time in his adult life, Caspian started paying attention to his internal dialogue, the running commentary he'd never consciously noticed before. You're being selfish. You have responsibilities. This meaning stuff is a luxury you can't afford. Take the first decent offer and stop being naive about the real world. The voice was chillingly familiar. It sounded exactly like his father. James Whitmore had worked 43 years for the same mining company, providing for his family through economic downturns, industry changes, and personal cost that he never once acknowledged aloud. He'd never complained, never pursued a passion, never asked if he was happy. He'd died 3 months after retirement, as if his entire purpose had died with his final paycheck. Caspian realized with horrifying clarity that he'd been unconsciously living his father's life instead of his own, following a compass that had never actually been his. The breakthrough came during an unexpected conversation with Maya. She was stressed about choosing college majors, worried about job prospects in an uncertain economy, asking him for career advice that felt impossibly hypocritical to give. "Dad," she said, curled up in the living room chair that used to be his reading spot before work consumed his evenings, "you've always been successful in business. What's the real secret?" Caspian started to deliver his usual response about hard work and reliability, then stopped mid-sentence. How could he give career advice when his own career had just ended in professional failure and personal emptiness? Instead, he said something that surprised them both. "Honestly, sweetheart, I don't think I actually know what success means." Maya looked at him with sudden, sharp interest. "What do you mean?" "I spent 20 years climbing a ladder as fast as I could, and when I finally got close to the top, I realized it was leaning against the wrong wall." The metaphor felt truer than anything he'd said in months. That night, he made a decision that sent Elena into near panic. He would spend the next month not frantically searching for any job that would pay the bills, but methodically searching for his own compass. They would figure out the finances somehow, but he couldn't keep navigating by someone else's magnetic north and expect different results. Elena's response was immediate and sharp. "Are you having a midlife crisis? Because we can't afford therapy. Soul searching or whatever this is." Caspian looked at his father's compass sitting on the kitchen counter, catching light from the window. "Maybe I'm not having a midlife crisis. Maybe I'm finally having a life." 6 weeks into his compass exploration, Caspian sat in Indira's office with 4 hand-drawn compass diagrams spread across her desk like a treasure map. For the first time in his adult life, all 4 needles were pointing in the same direction, and the alignment felt like discovering he'd been colorblind his entire career. This is the moment that changes everything. The breakthrough trigger came from the most unexpected source imaginable: his daughter Sophia's 8th grade science project on climate change and corporate responsibility. "Dad," she'd said the previous evening, surrounded by poster boards and research printouts, "why don't big companies actually care about the environment? Like really care, not just pretend for marketing?" He'd started to give a standard corporate response about regulatory compliance and stakeholder expectations, then stopped. Because the honest answer was devastating. They didn't care, not really. At Meridian, environmental considerations were afterthoughts, compliance requirements, marketing opportunities designed to improve brand perception. Never core business priorities that affected actual decisions. But what if they could be? What if caring about the environment could actually make companies more profitable? That night, Caspian did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He followed. Pure curiosity instead of obligation. He researched sustainable business practices until 2 a.m., reading case studies of companies reducing environmental impact while dramatically increasing profitability. He discovered the emerging field of corporate sustainability consulting, a sector growing at 23% annually, while most consulting markets stagnated. The numbers were staggering and irrefutable. Companies implementing comprehensive sustainability strategies saw average cost savings of 25–35% within 2 years through reduced waste, improved efficiency, and streamlined operations. They had 40% higher employee retention, 60% better brand reputation scores, and 45% stronger customer loyalty metrics. Yet 73% of mid-sized businesses had no systematic approach to environmental optimization. The golden equation crystallized with mathematical precision. Sustainability, ex-operations expertise, massive untapped market. Everything clicked into perfect alignment. Values compass. Environmental stewardship had always mattered to him deeply, but he'd buried it under practical career concerns. For 2 decades. Talents compass. Operational optimization was his superpower. Why not apply it to the planet's most urgent challenges? Impact compass. Helping companies become profitable and environmentally responsible could create massive positive change at scale. Joy compass. For the first time in 20 years, thinking about work made him energized instead of exhausted. Quotable wisdom emerged fully formed. You don't find your purpose by asking what the world needs. You find it by discovering where your deepest passion meets the world's greatest need, then building a bridge between them. But here was the contrarian insight that shattered everything he'd believed about career security. The most sustainable career isn't the one that guarantees traditional security. It's the one that aligns your unique gifts with genuine market need. For 20 years, he'd tried to make himself indispensable by doing what everyone else could do, just more efficiently. Now he understood that true career security came from doing something only he could do, in a way only he could do it, for people who desperately needed exactly that combination. The universal principle was blindingly obvious once he saw it. Every person possesses a unique combination of talents, values, experiences, and perspectives that creates a contribution only they can make. The tragedy isn't that people lack purpose, it's that they never learn to read their own compass. His before and after transformation was mathematically measurable. Before. Following external compasses, optimizing other people's priorities, measuring worth through titles and salaries, feeling progressively emptier despite increasing success. After. Following internal compass alignment, optimizing for values work integration, measuring worth through meaningful contribution, feeling energized by infinite possibility. The compass metaphor reached its full transformative power. Just as a magnetic compass works by aligning with invisible electromagnetic fields, a career works by aligning with your internal values and external market opportunities. The magic happens precisely at that intersection. Caspian held his father's compass, finally understanding its true inheritance. It wasn't pointing him toward the same path his father had taken out of duty and sacrifice. It was teaching him to find his own true north through conscious choice and authentic alignment. The real-world test arrived faster than expected, and with stakes that made his previous corporate projects look like practice rounds. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, CEO of Ecotech Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing company with 340 employees, had found Caspian through Indira's professional network. She was facing an existential crisis. New federal environmental regulations threatened to shut down 2 of her primary facilities unless she could reduce carbon emissions by 40% within 18 months, while maintaining production levels and profitability. Traditional environmental consultants want $300,000 for a compliance audit, she told him during their first meeting in her cramped office, surrounded by regulatory documents and financial projections. They'll spend 6 months telling us everything we're doing wrong, then disappear. Meanwhile, we're bleeding money, trying to meet impossible standards. Frankly, Mr. Whitmore, we can't afford to fail, and we can't afford most solutions. This was his first opportunity to apply 20 years of operational expertise to environmental sustainability under the highest possible stakes. Everything he'd discovered about compass alignment would be tested but instead of optimizing for efficiency alone, he optimized for what he now called triple alignment: environmental impact, operational efficiency, and financial performance working together instead of against each other. His specific methodology was revolutionary in its simplicity. Week 1. Energy flow mapping. He traced every kilowatt-hour through the facility with obsessive precision, identifying waste points that traditional environmental audits consistently missed because they focused on compliance rather than optimization. Week 2. Material life cycle analysis. He calculated the true cost of raw materials, including procurement, processing, disposal, and replacement cycles, revealing hidden opportunities for circular resource utilization. Week 3. Process integration design. He found 17 opportunities to use waste heat from one manufacturing process to power another, plus 6 ways to convert waste streams into sellable byproducts. The immediate results exceeded everyone's expectations, including his own. Day 12. Identified $47,000 in annual energy savings through equipment timing optimization that required zero capital investment. Day 18. Discovered a waste stream that could be converted into saleable byproducts worth $31,000 annually, plus $15,000 in avoided disposal costs. Day 21. Redesigned workflow to reduce material waste by 31% while actually increasing production speed by 8%. But the unexpected challenge wasn't technical, it was human. Some employees viewed environmental initiatives as threats to their job security. Middle management worried about increased operational complexity. The CFO questioned every expenditure that didn't have immediate, measurable returns. Caspian found himself developing skills he'd never needed in traditional operations work: storytelling, emotional intelligence, vision casting. He had to help people see how environmental sustainability connected directly to job security, company growth, and personal values they already held. Comment below. If you've ever had to convince others that doing good and doing well aren't opposites, because building that bridge is exactly the skill the world needs most right now. The ripple effects were immediate and mathematically measurable. Employee satisfaction scores increased 34% as workers felt genuine pride in their environmental impact. Customer retention improved 18% as clients valued the company's authentic sustainability commitment. Operational costs decreased 27% through systematic waste, reduction and efficiency improvements. Regulatory compliance stress virtually eliminated through proactive optimization rather than reactive compliance. Secondary validation came from sources that surprised everyone. Rebecca Martinez mentioned the results to industry peers, generating 7 immediate consulting inquiries. Elena noticed Caspian's energy and presence at home improving dramatically. He was excited to share work stories for the first time in years. Maya and Sophia started asking detailed questions about his projects with genuine interest instead of polite obligation. Most importantly, the transformation wasn't temporary or project-specific. 6 months later, Ecotech Industries had reduced emissions by 48%, exceeding regulatory requirements while improving profitability by 22%. They'd become a model that other companies were actively studying and attempting to replicate. The sustainability wasn't just environmental, it was professional, personal, and systematic. 18 months after that devastating termination meeting, Caspian stood behind a podium at the Pacific Northwest Sustainability Summit, facing an audience of 400 business leaders, his fathers. Brass compass positioned beside his presentation remote. The irony was delicious. He was delivering the keynote address at an event he'd never heard of during his 20 years in traditional operations. "How many of you," he began, making eye contact across the packed auditorium, "have ever felt professionally successful and personally empty at exactly the same time?" Nearly every hand in the room rose immediately. That's what happens when you follow the wrong compass for too long. His consulting practice, Compass Sustainability Solutions, was thriving beyond his most optimistic projections. He was earning 87% of his previous salary while working. The life transformation was measurable across every significant area. Financial: 15% pay reduction, but 400% increase in work satisfaction and meaning. Relational: Elena reported feeling married to the person I actually fell in love with 20 years ago instead of his career. Family: Maya had asked him to help research environmental science programs. Sophia was writing her college application essay about my dad's second act revolution. Health: Lost 28 pounds without trying, sleeping through the night consistently, blood pressure normalized to healthy ranges. Impact: His client companies had collectively reduced carbon emissions by 385,000 tons annually, while improving profitability by an average of 19%. But the most profound transformation was internal and impossible to quantify. Caspian had learned to read his own compass instead of everyone else's. During the teaching portion of his keynote, he shared the framework that had transformed not just his career, but his entire relationship with work and life. The 3 universal compass principles. Orientation before direction. Understand where you are and what truly matters to you before deciding where to go next. Most people choose direction without understanding their orientation, leading to decades of frantic movement without meaningful progress. True. Alignment creates sustainable energy. When your values, talents, and impact point in the same direction, work becomes energizing instead of draining. Misalignment is the root cause of professional burnout and personal emptiness. True north is uniquely personal. There is no universal definition of success that applies to everyone. Your true north exists at the intersection of what you're uniquely gifted to do and what the world uniquely needs from you. The final evolution of his compass metaphor tied everything together with crystalline clarity. A compass doesn't eliminate the journey or guarantee easy travel. It ensures you're on the right journey. The goal isn't to avoid getting lost. The goal is to get lost on the path that leads to where you actually want to go. The connection back to his opening crisis was powerful and complete. That termination, letter that had felt like the end of his professional story, had actually been the beginning of his authentic career. Getting fired hadn't destroyed his future. It had revealed that he'd never actually had a career, just a series of increasingly demanding jobs that kept him too busy to notice he wasn't living his own life. The legacy impact extended far beyond his personal transformation. Elena had started a women's career transition support group that met monthly at their local library. Maya was planning to study environmental engineering with a focus on corporate sustainability. Sophia had become passionate about sustainable fashion and was designing a high school club around ethical consumer choices. Most significantly, Caspian had begun mentoring other professionals through major career transitions, teaching them to identify and follow their own compass instead of society's magnetic north. The framework was proving replicable, scalable, and desperately needed across industries and age groups. His consulting clients weren't just implementing environmental improvements. They were discovering that sustainability principles applied to every aspect of business operations, from employee retention to customer loyalty to long-term profitability. Here's your immediate call to action. Pull out a piece of paper right now and draw 4 circles labeled values, talents, impact, and joy. In each circle, write what truly matters to you, not what you think should matter, not what others expect, but what actually energizes and fulfills you. Where do these circles overlap? That intersection is your true north. The question isn't whether you have a compass, everyone does. The question is whether you've learned to read it instead of following everyone else's. Caspian picked up his father's compass one final time, feeling its familiar weight in his palm. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. The greatest inheritance my father left me wasn't this compass. It was the courage to follow my own. Because sometimes the direction that looks like complete failure is actually the path to finding yourself.